So, a lot of you listening are entrepreneurs or thinking about starting a business, you're business minded. I think a podcast is a perfect leg to a business. It's a great add on, not necessarily as an immediate money maker, but more of a marketing tool. And I think if you can make that distinction in your head, that's going to be very, very key for you because a lot of people are like, oh, another stream of income. Let's start a podcast.
So you want to make an impact. You're thinking about starting a business, sharing your voice. How do women do it that handle motherhood, family, and still chase after those dreams? Well, listen each week as we dive into the stories of women who know. This is Call Me CEO. Have you ever thought about starting a podcast? That is one of the number one questions that I've gotten from entrepreneurs as well as friends that know me. And so I thought, man, I should create an episode just for you, invite my friend Jessie, who I started a podcast with. At the same time, we're about 4 to 6 months apart from when we each started our podcast. She does management. I help with the coaching of the podcast. And so we help a lot of people through these questions. So listen in on this episode because I think you're going to be able to decide what it is you want to podcast about and if podcasting is right for you. Let's go. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Call Me CEO. I am your host, Camille Walker, and today I have one of my very best friends in the world, Jessie Larson. We are talking about, is it time to start a podcast and what you need to know before starting one? Jessie and I go way back, and just like any other time, I am so excited to have her because you get to know her better and see why she's one of my best friends. Jessie, thank you for being on the show today.
I'm so happy to be here and I'm glad we made this happen. I think both of us started our podcast over 2 years ago and we're like, we should be on one another's and we're finally making it happen. So.
The proof is in the pudding. It's one of those things that she and I both, and Jessie started before I did, where we said, okay, I think we think we want to start a podcast. We're not sure. You know, it's one of those things. It's like jumping off a cliff into a pool of water where you're like, do I really want to do this? Is this something I can manage? And I think one of the best things for both of us is having that sounding board or someone behind in our corner saying, you can do this. So Jessie, tell us about how you started your podcast, a little bit more about your history of what got you to where you started your podcast and about your family, as we are moms here. So we love hearing about that too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So like Camille said, we go way back. I think we first met back when I was being a blogger and, the journey to wherever you are is full of so many like pivots and twists and turns and stepping stones along the way. So, and I think that that's important to recognize is that you're just constantly learning, you're constantly growing. Everything is a step and something that you're learning. And that's when we met. I was doing a different kind of content creation back when I think my daughter was just barely born. She's 9 now. So it's been quite a while. I've got 3 kids. My youngest just went off to first grade. So it's a whole new world that both of us are entering at the same time. So very cool and very cool to have been slowly building a business and an online presence over the years while they were little, so that now that they are gone, I have time to go full in on this. So 2 years ago, I started the Positively You podcast after thinking about it for probably 3 years prior. Camille, you know this, like I'd mentioned it and you're like, okay, cool. And that was before podcasts were really popular. So it was like, I want to do podcasts. And you were like, you want to do what? And it's been just this beautiful growth journey and it's evolved, and I can't say enough good things about podcasting. I am like the world's biggest fan. As you say, jumping into the pool, like jump in. The water is so fun.
Yes, I love that. And, it's really fun because even going through the process of deciding what podcast you wanted to start, what you wanted it to be, like, tell us the name of it. You forgot to mention the name of your podcast. Tell us what it's about.
I swear I said it. It's the Positively You podcast. I am a personal development, self-help junkie. I've been diving into that kind of world since I was like 12 and 13, starting with like the Chicken Soup for the Soul kind of
Mm-hmm.
books. I've always loved that. And so I was binging all of them on my podcast apps and just had this thought like I love talking about that. I want to do that. And so that's what I did. I started the Positively You podcast, started diving into more personal development, pulling on the experts that could talk about the things that I wasn't the expert for. And it's been 2 years later of amazing conversations with people that I never would have had access to without starting the podcast. And so selfishly, it's been so fun for me to just be able to ask people that I've admired and wanted to learn from the questions, but then getting to share those conversations with an audience on a larger scale has been so much fun.
Do you feel like you have a closet full of clothes with nothing to wear, or you go shopping frequently, but you aren't excited about your wardrobe? Well, I want to give a huge shout out to our sponsor of this episode, Delee Cox, who is a stylist with a passion for helping women curate a wardrobe that they will love for years to come. She will teach you how to define your personal style, create new outfits from old clothes, and create you a shopping list so you can add pieces mindfully. She is about sustainability and creating pieces that mix and match together, and she'll even help you take photos of the outfits that she's helped curate for you so that when you stand in front of your closet with a blank stare and not knowing what to wear, you can actually pull up that resource of outfits that she'll help put together with you. You can follow her on Instagram at thestylistnextdoor_UT, or check out her website, thestylistnextdoor.net, for details. Mention this podcast and get $25 off any service. Delee has helped hundreds of women, including some of my close friends, and she would love to help you refresh your wardrobe without buying a whole new one.
I love it. And that's one thing I think as you're deciding, do I want to start a podcast? Do I not? Do I have enough passion about this? Is there enough that I could talk about forever and ever? I think one of the best things about creating a podcast is that you do get to think about something that you could talk about forever. What is something that makes you so excited that when things get slow or hard or challenging, that you still have that fire of something that really ignites your soul? And I think going back to your childhood, in any capacity of what you're choosing to do as an entrepreneur, is key for longevity, because there will come times that you feel burnout, exhausted, lackluster, if you will. And so really tapping into that connection to your youth is a big part. So I love that you said that, because I think that that's something that can so easily be forgotten.
Oh, yeah. I think there are so many clues when we look back to the things that lit us up. And it might not be like the exact same thing, but digging like, well, what was it about that thing I loved as a kid, right? If it was like being on stage, I don't necessarily want to like be performing in musicals all the time, but like, what was it that I loved about that, right? And so whatever that was for you as a kid, those are such good clues. Cause like you said, yeah, life gets, monotonous and boring and just full of all the things we have to do, that there's those clues that you can dive into with your childhood. So I love that you brought that up.
Yay. Yes. Okay. So there have been many, many of you, and I say that collectively because with Jessie's podcast and my own, we've had many women come to us and ask, how do I start a podcast? How do I know if starting a podcast is right for me? And where do I start? And so Jessie and I have been talking this morning about, hey, what if we just recorded an episode and we share what we've learned, so that if you are interested and you're looking for more guidance, that's something actually she and I do for other people, both in the coaching and sorting through what it is you want to say and who you want to say it to, as well as now Jessie is managing other people's podcasts with the editing and growth strategy and things like that. So we've actually been putting together tips and clues of how to do that together. So if you are having to pause right now, or for whatever reason you don't know, there is actually a freebie that will be in the show notes below where we outline how to start a podcast and also links to how we can help you with a free discovery call. So keep that in mind as we're going into these topics in the next few minutes or 20 minutes or however long we go. So number one, we have always said, and you've heard this a million times because I even have a 5-day sequence for free on discovering your why. And we all know we've heard this 100 times before, really digging into that why of who you are, what message you want to share, and deep down, what is that feeling that you're searching for? So Jessie, talk to me about discovering your why. Let's dive into this a little bit as to why it's so important that when you're starting a podcast, when you're starting a business, whatever the thing might be, that you know why.
Yes. Yeah. Like you said, if you're listening to Camille and you've been around this podcast, the idea of finding your why and diving deeper is nothing new. If you are in business at all, if you have a message to share. So preaching to the choir here with that. I think knowing your why is so important. And I think that's why so many of us are frustrated with social media and the way that we're communicating with our audiences right now is because we're trapped by algorithms and we're not able to actually get that why out. We've got 15-second clips. And if the internet decides it likes us that day, then that gets shared, right? Which is why I love podcasting so much. That was the draw for me was I wanted to have longer conversations that I wanted to reach people and talk deeper and not be limited to 160 characters or 15-second clips. So that was a huge part of my why, was that there was meaningful conversations that I wanted to have, and the apps and the Facebook and the Instagram was not the platform for me to do it. So that was a huge part of my why and why I was able to go that avenue. So that's just a good example of where I was. Your why is going to be different, but I think figuring that out is going to help you to stay consistent and to know your action steps and what you're going to do when barriers and detours and things that come that make you have to pivot get in your way. That why is so important.
Yes, I agree with that. I think that something that's really interesting about podcasting too, I remember when I was deciding whether or not to do it, is that I knew that connecting in a deeper level is something that's always been really important to me. And I really wanted to storytell around, okay, so in my experience, I had been working with businesses and brands and entrepreneurs in a different way of people coming to me as a blogger and saying, share my product, talk about this. I want people to know about my clothing boutique or my candles or my new flatware set or whatever it was. And what I loved is that rather than just promoting a product and being like, this helps my teeth get whiter, way better than crest strips or something, I just got so sick of the surface level conversations, just like you're saying, where it was like, tell me why you started your business. Tell me about who you are. Because I think that what we're all looking for more than anything else is that connection of who we are, not what we see. And so much of Instagram became what we see, and it felt so surfacey to me. And so that's why for me, to sharing a story of how a business was born and how we can live from or learn from each other became this place where I was like, oh, that makes me want to get out of bed and record an episode right now. And I think that that's what you're saying too, is like, what makes you want to get out of bed and like push through something because you're so excited about it, because there's a deeper level of connection or storytelling or helping someone else. Because I think a lot of times that is what podcasting can do. And it can also be a really beautiful visual way of sharing a story if you're wanting to maybe do a YouTube channel with it as well, which is another layer, which I wouldn't suggest right off the get-go doing that unless you're almost doing it from reverse of like, oh, well, I'm recording video anyway. May as well grab that audio and put it into a podcast. Yes, do it that way. But if you're like, oh, I really want to record story or, interviews or whatever else, but you're really uncomfortable with video, start with the audio. What do you think about that, Jessie, about the video and the audio component?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what I think about just starting. I think you need to remove all of your barriers. So if you are like, oh, I want to start a podcast, but what about video too? And that's like the thing that's holding you back, then push video off a cliff and ignore it for a minute, because we do that to ourselves. I think we give us all of these barriers to entry that stop us because we're not quite ready. We don't know all the things right there. So I agree with you. If you're already doing it and you feel confident and ready to go, then 100% like put your stuff everywhere, like audio, video, everywhere you can be, because the more eyes and ears that can be on you, the better. But if it's something that's holding you back and so you're not doing anything at all, like go to the lowest common denominator and start with the simplest thing for you to just get started.
Yes. Which is really interesting because that's the keyword here is just start. I think that as we've talked about this many times, yes, there needs to be a strategy for a launch. We both believe that. That's actually why we help people through that process of creating excitement and anticipation and tapping into the audience and people that you're having conversation with already. But it shouldn't be a perfection stall of like, oh no, I don't have the exact perfect audio, or oh no, I don't have the exact perfect storyline for each and every episode. It doesn't matter. I think that B minus work is what's going to get you there. So you just need to be comfortable with B minus work, knowing that if it gets you started, you will continue to improve as you record.
100%. Perfection is where dreams go to die. Like, yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, both me and you, we waited longer than we probably would have if we just would have gotten started. And I'm 2 years into this now, and I love where I'm at. But I think, what if I was 3 years in? What if I, what if I like, which is fine. You can't live in regret, but every time you start something new, this has been my experience in life, whether it's like a new hobby, a new workout routine, a new anything, it's like, oh, why did I wait to start this? Because this is amazing. And, so diving in and just getting past that fear and getting past that, what if it's not perfect? We know this.
Yeah.
Preaching to the choir. So
I think one thing about podcasting and audio intake of content is something that is increasing in popularity. Why are podcasts getting so popular? It's because many of us are listening to them in our cars, out for our walks, when we're doing laundry, dishes, whatever the things are. And so that is the way that media is now being consumed. So if you're feeling that pull and there's something that you feel like you are called to share, we are here to say, share it. And we're going to go through some of our most common questions that we get from people who are interested. So number one, that is the reason, like discovering your why. Number two, we want to talk about purpose and goal of starting the podcast. So Jessie, talk us through purpose and goal.
Yes. So a lot of you listening are entrepreneurs or thinking about starting a business, you're business minded. I think a podcast is a perfect leg to a business. It's a great add-on. Not necessarily as an immediate money maker, but more of a marketing tool. And I think if you can make that distinction in your head, that's going to be very, very key for you. Because a lot of people are like, oh, another stream of income. Let's start a podcast. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news there, but it's not going to be like this like immediate cash flow entity for you. Podcasting is definitely the long game, but I think it is a great marketing tool for an existing business. So if that is part of your purpose and goal, if you're like, listen, I need to get more eyes and ears on a product that I'm selling or a service, whether it's a physical product or a service, or there's a number of things that your business could be, having a podcast is a great way to funnel people into that. So if you're coming at it from like a business and you're just wanting to add that on, I think that's a great purpose to have.
Yeah. I think one of the best bits of advice that I got when starting a podcast, it was actually from Allison Prince, who is an incredible entrepreneur and an amazing person who helps people create income from selling product online. Is she said, if you're starting a podcast, you need to have something that you're selling or you're going to resent it. And I thought, well, that's interesting because starting the podcast for me, it was more about sharing story and connecting with people and wanting to get into that really deep connection of who and why they started their business. But she said, come up with something that you want to sell or a part of the journey that is something that you already created to sell. So not necessarily that the podcast is what you're selling, obviously, because it's a channel, like Jessie said, for marketing and storytelling. But if you're giving really good content to teach other people skills or product or whatever the thing is that you're trying to get, if you have connection to something you're selling, and that could be through email capture, or that could be through visibility where you're sharing not only your own podcast, but being a guest on other people's podcasts, there's got to be a strategy involved where this podcast may not bring you in ad revenue through sponsorships, but maybe you're selling affiliates. Maybe you're sharing content of your own product or service or coaching or, any number of things. So for me personally, that was why I started my 60 Days to VA program, because one of my number one questions that I had from my audience was, how do I make money from home? And I thought, okay, if I'm sharing a channel with mothers who are entrepreneurs, giving them an avenue for how to make money, virtual assisting is an amazing way to tap into making money right now. So that was a piece of my strategy. And as well, the flip side, I have all these busy entrepreneurs who say, I need more time, I'm so overwhelmed. Well, hire a virtual assistant, which is a flip side of that coin of how that person could create revenue. So while I'm sharing stories about how to build a business as an entrepreneur from other people's perspectives, as well as tips from my own journey over the past decade, that is a piece where I'm able to share how others can do the same. So Jessie's strategy is different from mine. And you can tell your story, Jessie, of how you have monetized your podcast. But I think that's something you need to sit down and really think of long-term. I'm planting a seed here to further this journey, however it is that you're hoping to make money, but create that from the beginning so that you have a purpose and you're planting seeds for the long-term game.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with having a hobby podcast.
Totally.
Right? Like if you are completely clear that that's what it is. Because if you have something that you're like, you know what, it's just a fun outlet for me. Like, hi, my son has a podcast. He's 11. And it really is. And he wants to like make merch and monetize it. And it's hilarious, but it's a hobby. And he just loves getting on and talking and having that as an outlet. So if that is you, that's totally fine. I'm not saying that you have to monetize everything, but I mean, we are on the Call Me CEO podcast where we're talking to entrepreneurs and moms who want to make money. So I'm guessing that is actually kind of the goal. And if that is, I think, like you said, having a strategy, because there are so many times you get excited about this podcast and you jump in and then you're like, oh, this is a lot of work and it's hard to be consistent. And if I'm bringing in, pennies, and there are so many podcasts out there that get started and don't get past 7 episodes. There's actually a term for it called pod fade, where they just fall off because it's like that excitement. It's like when you start a new diet or something and you're like, yay, and it like gets Monday to Wednesday. And then you're like, what diet? Like the same thing happens like with podcasting where you're like, yes, I'm going. And then you're like, oh, I skipped a week and oh, it doesn't matter because I'm not making money. And then suddenly like 2 years has gone by and you've never posted another episode. So being clear on like what your why is, what your purpose is, and then having a long-term goal, but like knowing that that's going to take time. Mm-hmm. I like what you mentioned about having affiliate ads, because I think especially when you're starting out and getting started, that's a great way to begin to monetize. Going out to like these big networks that have like sponsorships and they're going to pay at like a rate of per 1,000 listens. And if you're not hitting like upwards of 10,000, 30,000, 50,000 listens per month, which is huge to get to. I'm nowhere near that, I'll be honest. You're going to be making, $2 a month, which is like, gee, thank you, But on the flip side, if you have an affiliate that you are talking about all the time and you've gained this trust with your listeners, which is what I love so much about podcasting. It's such an intimate experience. For 30 minutes to an hour, you've got someone one-on-one with you. And I really do like, it's so funny. I'll be talking to my husband all the time, like, oh, my friend told me this. And he's like, is it a friend or is it a podcast host? Like, who is it? And I'm like, it's a podcast host. But like, they really do become such an integral part of your life because you're spending like this time with a host. And so your know, like, and trust factor is through the roof through a podcast. So if you're recommending affiliate ads that aren't just something that was like dropped in by an ad network, your audience knows like, oh, she loves this product. She uses it. And you're going to get much more money and income from an affiliate ad than you would be trying to go out to like a big name network, which I know like you get in and you want like, right. We all like, show me the shiny thing. And I want to go for that. But I've seen huge success with not only myself, but clients as well, with starting with those affiliate ads, just one or two or three, and starting to get an income that way, which then again trains your audience to listen for those ads. It helps you to not seem more legit, but like, oh, she's got an ad on here. Like she must be, you know what I mean? Like it kind of like ups that like cool factor, I guess, if you want to call it that. So I think that that's a fantastic way to start if you don't have your own product yet. I know right when you launched, you didn't have 60 Day to VA yet. And that was something that kind of like came in, but you did have either products you were talking about or companies that you were talking to and able to bring that in, and your audience trusted you on it. So there are creative ways that you can monetize beside what you would just think of like, oh, when I listen to podcasts, I hear ads. That must be the only way. It's not. There's tons of ways to get creative with how you're monetizing and making sure that you're getting a bang for your buck for the time that you're putting in on podcasting.
Yes. Yeah. I think that it's one of those things that the story of the next thing that I actually have as a point is that we get questions a lot of, why does it help, or is it worth it? And I think that that's something that would be answered so differently by each person that starts the podcast, because it all goes back to what is that end game? What's that goal that you're going for? Because that will change the answer. Is it worth it? Does it help my business to grow? Or like so for example, let's say I have a person who has been creating content online as a coach for years. And they have products that they sell. They have been doing the social media game, and they're considering starting a podcast. Well, for that person, answering the question of, is it worth it, could be very different, because they could be planting seeds for getting new people to coach. They could be coming with their own like membership or product line or whatever the thing is. Their question and answer to, is it worth it, would be very different from, let's say, another person who has a brick and mortar business, and they are helping people to buy, let's say, activewear. And let's say that they're sharing product or information about how to be more healthy. And then they'll say, hey, and we have this amazing product line of our activewear that's so affordable, and it's made especially for women. And this is why it's amazing, or it's an outdoor clothing company or whatever. Is it worth it for them? Maybe. Yes. No.
Yeah.
It depends, because the investment and the expectation is going to be different for the coach, and it's going to be different for the product line person. And so I think that's why it's really important for you as an individual to go through that process and say, who am I talking to? What is my goal? What is my long-term plan for starting this podcast? Because then you will know, is it worth it? And why does this help me? Jessie, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think understanding and defining what success looks like for you and you personally, because we can look outward and be like, well, that person's successful and I'm nowhere near them, but that might, like you doing that exact same thing, might not feel like success for you. So I think that getting very, very clear on what is successful and having something to measure that by, if it's a number of listens, if it's a revenue number that you're bringing in, that you are clear on what that feels like, so that you know when you need to pivot or when you need to change or when you need to jump ship.
Yeah. And you're going to it's really interesting, because as you build an audience for a specific field, you will get emails and requests for guests to be on your show, or for people who are wanting to promote themselves or their product or their service. And I think having a really clear understanding of what your goal is for your podcast and who you're talking to will help you to know, is this going to be a benefit to having them on my show, or is it not? Or maybe you're doing a solo podcast and you know right from the get-go, you're not looking for guests, it's just you. And so I think being able to have access to that understanding, and then also knowing, hey, I can go as a guest on other people's podcasts, because that's one of the best ways for visibility, is to connect with the listening audience, of knowing that, is that going to be a good experience for you to be a guest on their podcast episode as well. So it can be a really cool way to collaborate, like we are right now.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, it's the coolest avenue. And I like that you mentioned, it's becoming more popular. It's how we are consuming content, because I don't have time to sit here and dedicate a half hour to watching a YouTube video. I would love to, but like I'm busy, I'm on the go, and I can still get all of that content in my ears. So yeah, getting yourself on to podcasts and just knowing what that end goal is. And if that feels successful to you, it comes back to the very first thing that Camille said with getting clear on your why.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go through some rapid fire questions that these are some that we get a lot. And again, if you didn't hear before, we have a free outline of what you want to go through when starting a podcast, where you can drop in your email and get access to that for free. We also have free discovery calls with both Jessie for podcast maintenance, with the editing and helping you with your podcast, as well as the coaching piece with me of knowing how to discover the question and answers to all of this, because that's something that we want to talk about right now, is really discovering how you make this happen. Because I know that a lot of times, just like we talked about, there are those hangups that we get of how do I just get started? You know, and I think having an outline like we're giving you for free is a big, big piece to that. But also having someone in your corner that can help walk you through the process is huge. So let's talk about strategy really quick, Jessie. So this is something that we get a question about a lot. How many episodes should I launch when I have my podcast go live? Go.
Okay. I'm just going to preface this first with a little disclaimer that everything can be individualized for you. And I don't like a one size fits all plan, but there are, right, like make it work
ideas
for you.
Yeah. Love it.
Definitely more than one. I say the magic number is kind of between 3 and 5. I like to launch with 3, but have 5 ready to go. So 3 is good to binge. It jumps your numbers up right at the beginning, so that different podcast apps are kind of like, oh, hey, what is this new thing? It just got like a huge intake of listens really, really quick. If you've got 3 out there, but one person's listening, right? Like everything is going to be times by 3. So launch with at least 3 episodes, but have 5 in your pocket.
Love it. Okay. What about music?
What about it?
How do I get it? How do I get music from my podcast? Like, what should it be like? How do I make sure that it's free for me to use?
Okay. There are a number of places that you can go. YouTube Audio Library has some free downloads that you can grab. I believe there's a site called Pixabay that has free downloads that you can grab. There are also a number of people on the internet that will charge you an arm and a leg for music. If you wanted to get it custom. Camille, I know that you got a custom music intro made for you by finding someone on Fiverr that did not charge an arm and a leg. Yep. So it is out there. There are free, cheap, and extremely expensive ways to do it, just like with anything. When you are picking music, that is somewhere where you can definitely fall down the rabbit hole and get stuck forever. So something that I suggest is like the episodes that you're already listening to, are there ones that stick out to you, like shows that you like, that you're like, oh, this is good. Do you like figuring out the genre and kind of like the beat that you like, and then narrowing it down, picking literally not more than like 3 to 5, and getting someone else to kind of listen with you, I think is key. But don't fall down the rabbit hole of music, because it's something you can always change later too.
Yeah. Love it. Who should I have host my podcast?
Ooh, there are so many hosts. So, you have to have it live somewhere, right? Your podcast has a home, and then it gets distributed out to like Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, blah, 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 all the places, but it has to live somewhere. Anchor is Spotify's like hosting platform, and Anchor has a free option. So if you're looking to like low entry rate, get rid of all your barriers, Anchor is a fantastic place to start. I also, there's so many, like you said, podcasting is becoming more and more popular, which is fantastic, which means there's so many more options for us, but options can also feel overwhelming as well. So don't get stuck here either. Anchor is a great free option to start. Libsyn, Buzzsprout, Simplecast. There's 3 for you. And I really don't have a favorite. I manage multiple podcasts on all of those, and each of them has things that I love, and each of them has things that I don't love. So
Yeah.
There's a
And
number.
if you're looking for reference to that below, I personally use Buzzsprout, and I'll give a link to that below. I really like having my podcast hosted somewhere so that I can see stats and get
Yes.
an idea for, how things are going. And then it's a really good way to be able to, if you get to the point of wanting to work with a sponsor or share your numbers in a way that you can track, that's a really good way to have access to that. Okay. So next
Absolutely.
question. How do I edit my podcast? And is that something that I could do on my own, or do I need to hire someone?
Yes. You can, both. You can do it yourself. And it is definitely the first thing that you're going to want to outsource because it is monotonous, especially if you're the person where your passion and your zone of genius is in the talking, is in the message that you're sharing, and then getting into the nitty gritty and the tech of everything isn't your zone of genius. Those are always the first things that you want to outsource and give that to somebody who that is where they thrive and where they shine. However, it is not hard to edit. If you're just getting started, there are very basic things that you can do. And again, because it's becoming so popular, there are platforms and apps popping up every single day that make it simple for the everyday person to be able to do that. An app that I am loving right now is called Descript. You can record straight into it and it will give you a Word document. So it transcribes everything for you. So it's super, super easy to edit that way. Also, GarageBand is free on your Mac if you have a Mac, or Audacity on a PC computer. Those are both free apps that you can use. And YouTube is your very best friend. Click, how do I edit this in YouTube? And it will walk you through, and you can do the very, very simplest. But if you do want to outsource that and not even bother with it, that is where I come in and save the day for you.
Yes. Yeah. And, with me, I think I've said this message again and again that especially if you're a busy entrepreneur, business owner already, and this isn't your first venture, chances are time is something you don't have right now as in surplus. With any new venture, you're going to invest time or money, or both. I mean, typically both. So you need to decide right now in your business, do you need to invest more time by learning the editing and the software and knowing how to do it yourself? Or are you in a place that you could invest more money because maybe you have a little more money and less time? And so that's something that you can really discover and figure out for yourself so that you know where you need to start as you start this podcast.
Absolutely. I think getting very clear with yourself about what your capacity is and what your resources is, both your time and your money. Because it's definitely, you're going to be trading time for sure to be doing it by yourself. And outsourcing is how we grow. Delegating to the people who are better at the things than you are. It can be hard to delegate. It can be scary to outsource at first, but you will grow so much faster and you will be able to use your time in a better way and serve your audience better if you are staying within your zone of genius. So if that's not your zone, go ahead and outsource that right away.
Yeah. And that's something that I actually coach people with. I help them hire their first virtual assistant and know what questions to ask. And I set them up with reliable sources of who they can interview. And that's been a huge benefit to entrepreneurs that I rub shoulders with every day, is finding people who are better at doing something than you are.
Yeah.
Let that be a place that you allow your business to grow by spreading the love, and it gives work to other people. And I think that is one of the best scenarios for everyone. So yes, very much. So Jessie, what about launch strategy? Do you think it's a good idea to have a launch strategy for when you have your podcast go live?
Absolutely. You need a launch strategy for anything. No one can come and buy anything if they don't know it's from you. No one can it would be if a movie just appeared at the movie theater and there was no previews for it. There was no hype. There was nothing. And you were like, why did no one come see my movie? It's really good. It has this A-list actor in it and it's a really good movie. But we never told anybody about it. Mm-hmm. So the same thing with your podcast. Whether or not you think you have a small audience or no audience or whatever, any sort of hype is good. So that can just be family and friends if it's very, very small. But don't be afraid to put it out there that you are starting this. I think so many times we get trapped in that like imposter syndrome of like, I want to start this thing, but I don't want to tell anybody because what? No, like shout it from the rooftops because you will get that support back. You need to step into, I am now a podcast host. Like, this is what I'm doing. Like, put on that and own it and shout it from the rooftops because no one is going to come and just seek you out and listen to it. You need to be the one to be proclaiming that this new podcast that's amazing and you absolutely have to listen to it. It's going to change your life. Like, you need to have that hype. And so having some sort of a launch strategy, I always say, you know, a couple weeks out, start throwing out some little teasers. Something big is coming. Something big that I love doing is creating an actual launch, like hype team that gets to be behind the scenes with you. So they can have special perks, right? You can offer them something, especially if you do have a product or a service that you're offering, you can have that to your little launch team. And then they're behind the scenes. They're sharing on social media. They're leaving you reviews. They're making sure that you download so that everything is getting boosted that launch week for you. And it's so much fun. Like, you're excited about it. Your best friend who you've been talking about is excited, but to have this like little circle of people who are equally excited and pushing this out, launch week can be such a party.
Yes, I love it. And if that's something, again, that you're listening to this and thinking, how do I even get started with that? Or is that something, how do I create a strategy that fits right with me and my goals and my business? That's something that Jessie and I can help you with. And I hope that as you've listened to this, you have felt excited about that thing that you're thinking of starting a podcast for, and that you've also felt that it is doable. There is so much opportunity to grow right now through podcasting. And I don't want you to think that it's too late or that there's no way that you can do this, because you can. And you need to put on that hat of I am a podcast host, just like Jessie said, and rehearse that and show up that way in your mind, because anything that comes to fruition is a belief and a decision that you've made first. And so getting your own mind and your own brain to realize that and accept that and to share it with that level of energy and excitement is what will make it come to life.
Absolutely. And I love what you said about getting into podcasting. It's not too late. I think, especially in the world that I'm in, I hear all the time, like every single day, like so-and-so starting a podcast in this. And it feels like, oh my gosh, everyone's starting a podcast. Like I'm too late to the game. And you're not at all. I think podcasting right now is where blogging was like, I don't know, 2013 maybe.
Yeah.
And where it's just exploding and there is room for you. In fact, I hear people say all the time, I can't find a podcast about XYZ that I want to listen to. Like, you might be that missing piece that someone is looking for. And so just removing those barriers of entry, getting in, putting on that identity of I'm doing this and stepping in. There is so much room for you in the podcast world. And I guarantee that if any thought has entered your mind about, should I do this? Or I'm curious about this, or I want to do this, like, that's a little flicker that is inside of you for a reason. Your voice in your message, whatever it is, needs to be heard. And me and Camille have the steps and the help. And like, we want nothing more than to help your message get out there in the world.
Amen, sister. All right. Well, this has been amazing. Jessie, thank you so much for being on the show today. Please tell our audience where they can find you online.
All right. Well, I am most active over on Instagram. Positively.Jessie is where you can find me there. My podcast airs weekly. You can listen to it anywhere you listen to your podcasts. It's the Positively You podcast. And anything else you need is at jessielarson.com.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And we will see you next week.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please subscribe and leave a review. That is one of the best ways that you can support this podcast, and it ensures that other people are able to listen and hear it as well. If you want to connect with me, you can reach out at Call Me CEO Podcast on Instagram, or send me an email at callmeceo@gmail.com if you think that you would be a great fit for our audience and you have a story to share of a business that you've built, or tell me about someone whose story you'd like to hear. I am always open to suggestions or ideas or questions that you have. You can reach out to me and we can connect there. See you next week.
Hey CEOs, thank you so much for spending your time with me. If you found this episode inspiring or helpful, please let me know in a comment and a 5-star review. You could have the chance of being a featured review on an upcoming episode. Continue the conversation on Instagram at Call Me CEO Podcast. And remember, you are the boss.